Well, start with something. If anyone comes and joins, they can join. And if you run out of questions then or stuff to talk about, we can finish early. It's up to you.
Well, I do. I kind of mentioned this before, but for some reason, I'm not satisfied in my head. I haven't resolved it.
Hmm.
When my husband passed, he was an only child. He has three children not serving the Lord. And on his deathbed, he transferred um, his inheritance, his birthright, whatever, to me.
Hmm.
It was something that the Holy Spirit led us to do.
Hmm.
So already the two become one. And then, and I doubt if you've ever been asked this question, but having received his inheritance like that, the spiritual inheritance, would that would I sometimes feel a need to resolve the gateways on his bloodline, and I'm not for sure if I'm responsible for that.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I think in a sense, if the Holy Spirit inspired you to carry something like, I mean, I guess it's similar to Elijah or an Elisha or whatever. It would have been that was always part of your destiny anyway. So, because it wouldn't be, well, the Holy Spirit's going to give you someone else's destiny, then you wouldn't be able to fulfill yours and someone else's. So it must have always been that you would have had this connection that would have been a joint similar thing, if you like, and therefore you are going to continue doing what was always yours to do, rather than, well, he gave you something of his and then you had to do the stuff that was his inheritance or his birthright or destiny. So it would have been yours anyway. So do you need to deal with his family line stuff? No, because he didn't pass on anything negative to you from the family line. He just gave you permission effectively to, hey, carry on outworking your destiny with my blessing and with everything that I have to impart, which is a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing. And you can always go and ask, if there are any accusations. See, I think when it comes to two becoming one, or you become one flesh with one another, there obviously is a physical part to that. There's a spiritual part to it, but I don't personally feel that it actually means that you have to deal with everything that your partner has or does, because if it did, then you would then have to, if I don't know, let's say my wife did something that was wrong, I'm not responsible for it. She is.
Right.
I'm maybe responsible to help her see that she's done something wrong or help her deal with it, but I'm not responsible for what she's done. I don't have to, it's not my actual act. It will be hers. And although I might be affected by it negatively, possibly, and other people might be, it's not, I don't have to go and say, well, I need forgiveness for what you've done. So I don't think that becoming one flesh is so, it becomes like that. It's entering into a relationship which has a physical union that, when it's in marriage, is not negative. So any relationship you have within marriage is a relationship within the God's covenant, not outside of it. And therefore, I don't think you're gonna inherit the negative things that come from your husband. Otherwise, we'd all be in trouble, wouldn't we? In a sense, because then we'd all have to take on two generational lines going onward forwards. We're having already got two of our own in terms of mother and father. Then we've got two more, so which I don't think anyone should have to bear that, so I don't really feel that that's really what happens.
I'm also wondering how would what he prayed over me, because this was his second marriage, how would that affect his children's birthright in the bloodline?
Well, again, if you're only doing what the Spirit led you to do, then his children's birthright bloodline would have never had that as part of it, a part of their destiny.
Oh, okay.
God obviously is aware of what he's called us all to do, and I don't think it's possible to remove that and pass it on to someone else to the detriment of someone else. It's almost like you can't steal someone's destiny.
Right.
It's their destiny. They may choose not to fulfill it, or they may choose to delay it, or they may choose to not fulfill it in this earthly realm, whatever, but it's still their destiny. And your husband can't give you his children's destiny.
Right.
It's because it's theirs. He doesn't have the right to give someone else's destiny away. God's already given it to them. It's already been written in their scroll. So God knows how it all works out in a sense. So he's not going to give somebody else's destiny to somebody. So, and I don't think your husband hasn't given you his destiny. He's just endorsed where your destiny and his were in agreement.
Okay.
If you see what I mean, and so he's endorsed that, and he has encouraged you to pursue it with his blessing. Which is a really good thing, and not a negative thing. And
I knew that was good. I just didn't know the spiritual aspects of it. And
no, but I think he's giving you his blessing and empowerment rather than passed on to you any of the negativity which comes from his own life, because that's his. We're all responsible for dealing with our own stuff. We're not responsible for dealing with anyone else's, and therefore I think you're pretty safe there, I think.
Yeah. Well, he comes from the American Indian heritage. And so I really, when you think about it, that could entail quite a bit,
It certainly could, yeah.
So I receive all of those blessings.
Absolutely, yeah. And the main thing is for each of us to discover what our destiny is and continue to pursue it in relationship with God and be at rest in it. I think that's the key. If we're not at rest, then we're not really flowing in the relationship, because the relationship itself establishes rest. And no one should be striving to fulfill something, but in the rest of relationship it naturally outworks as we just walk that relationship out. And if we keep walking with God every day, then we're not going to go too far wrong, are we? Because he's not going to lead us astray. So it's just a matter of continually to walk with him and fellowship with him and relate to him and seek him for anything, therefore, that's a mandate that he wants for us. We just got to do what Jesus did, see what the Father's doing and throw ourselves into it, but not strive to do it in performance. Because we can't earn God's favor and blessing or his love, whether we do or don't do what he wants us to do. He already loves us. And so his favor and blessing is upon us. So we just need to enjoy it. I mean, I think the Christian life, it should be something to enjoy. It should be joy. I'm not saying that there aren't difficulties to overcome, but even in difficulties, if you have a positive attitude towards it, it can still be joyful in overcoming. It doesn't have to be heavy and negative and miserable, whatever. It's like he wants it to be joyful. He's joyful. Father, Son, and Spirit are in a dance of relationship. It's all full of joy and peace and love. That's what the circle of their relationship is continually like. And of course, they've imparted that to us, in that Jesus said, well, my peace I leave you, not as the world gives you peace, but I leave you my peace. My joy will be in you, so your joy can be full and love one another as I've loved you and the Father's loved me. So, you know, he all of it's there for us to enjoy. And we should be in one relationship with him. You know, John 17 goes into the unity of that, and how if the world should see that we're in that united relationship with Father, Son, and Spirit.
Yeah.
Enjoying it, you know.
Yeah, enjoying it.
I hate misery, you know, religious misery. You know, it's like, why would the world want to be miserable? You know, and so much religion is being killjoys. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. All you can do is go to church on a Sunday and read your Bible and pray every day. And that's it. You know, and wait for Jesus to rescue you. You know, it's like that's their existence. So much of religion is that. It's just going through the motions of what you know is an obligation or a duty that you need to perform and not enjoying it. Well, you know, I don't think really that's a very attractive proposition for people to want. So we need to express our joy and our passion for life. And, you know, French have got a word for it, joie de vivre, you know, the joy of life. You know, I'm not sure if the Germans have got a word for it. I'll have to ask some of them. We've actually got 3 Germans now living with us here. One has been with us a few years, and 2 came at the end of last week. So they've just moved and come to live here. And so I spent a few hours with them last night. We were just sharing some history of how we got where we were and things like that, which was great. So I'm not sure, you know, what their words are for it, but the French have always got nice words for things.
Always nice words.
They're all very, very poetic in there. Not that I understand much of it.
Yeah, I would be in trouble with French and Italians. Which, you know, you said something about how we represent, you know, that we should be joyful. Yesterday, you know, we have those that at the stoplight ask for money.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, they live on the streets, and more often than not, they'll have the sign that says God bless, or they'll be wearing a big cross, and they'll look so terrible. And I was analyzing that yesterday, and I go, I just don't know how I feel about that. You know, I mean, you're saying that God does not provide.
Yeah.
And while I know that there are people who are genuinely in need, there are others that use God to make us feel sorry for them. So I was really having some issues with that yesterday.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't like to be manipulated to do something. So, I mean, you know, I just feel led by the Spirit. Generally, we don't give money to people. We offer them help, you know, so we provide for them. So they don't need our money. We can give them food, we can give them clothes, they can have showers, we can help them somewhere to live. You know, we have very practical things we do. We never give money. It's a policy. We will not give money. We will buy bus tickets. We will buy tickets for people to get home. We will do all that, but we won't give people money.
Yeah.
And therefore, you know, those that are in the US, it's different from the UK. Because in the UK, if people wore a cross or whatever, no one would really take any notice of it. Because it isn't such a religious culture. Whereas you still have church going as quite a strong culture, and quite a lot of people go to church because it's the traditional thing to do. And therefore, wearing a cross has an association with a lot of people go to church. So by doing this, they will help me. It doesn't necessarily mean that that person's got any relationship with God at all. He's just playing the system. So he's just using certain things to pull at the heartstrings of gullible Christians,
right,
to help them. And we just need to ask every time, what should we do? You know, and if I see someone, you know, begging or whatever, and sometimes I feel no leading to do anything whatsoever, but sometimes if I do, often it's to go and buy them a cup of coffee, or it's to, you know, go and talk to them not just give them, because they're professional beggars and they make a huge living. Some of them, it's just a fact. So you have to have discernment, not to act callously or in any way with a lacking of compassion, but Jesus must have seen people begging all the time. But there's not really that much record of him doing anything about it, other than those who came to him for help, and then he would have helped them in a realistic way, which is probably to heal them and make them whole, not give them money. You've got no record of Jesus giving money to anybody.
Yeah, I worked for a church for several years, and you reminded me of this time that this guy, there were like 3 or 4 of them. One waited on the porch, but 3 came in. One of them had a pair of crutches, and they were wanting money. And it was our policy never to give money either. And we would help them any way that we could, but not give them money. And so the pastor wasn't there that day, and I was alone. And I said, I'll have him call you, or I'll give you his number where you can call him and you can connect. But there's nothing that I can personally do. You'll have to wait for him to get back. They went out, and of course they approached some people in the parking lot that were there. But then someone later saw that one guy with the crutches just throw them over his shoulder and walk on down. And I thought, God, we had a lot of stuff like that happen, and you can't give money,
Well, you've got to do whatever God says to do.
Right.
And that's the key. In a certain occasion, if God told me to give money,
right,
then I would. But
right.
we have to be discerning both of the situation and have such a relationship with God that we can ask him and be led by what he says in those situations. And of course, not get offended or angry that someone's trying to take advantage of us, because people do, and so it's having the right attitude to that, forgiving them, blessing them, not holding that against them, because they've got needs that they probably feel, and actually doing that is probably better than going out and robbing somebody, in a sense, you know what I mean? So they've chosen not to rob people. They've chosen just to try and mug them off, really, and deceive them. So, but people who've got addictions, they're driven. It's like they don't necessarily think rationally. They're driven by their need, for a fix or whatever it might be. It is, to a sense, an illness which sort of overcomes people's normal way of thinking, and there's a desperation and a drivenness to be able to, I need this, and I need to, and often if you're in any families that have had people with addictions, how manipulative they can get. They can be very deceptive, very manipulative, really playing on emotions of family members and that sort of stuff. And you have to be very careful you don't get taken in or moved to be an enabler. There's so many parents and family members that become enablers because they're afraid to offer tough love and to do what's right. They become enablers, and people have got in big trouble with that, even going to buy drugs for their children and things like that, and it's a real risky thing to do, but we've got to find ways of demonstrating love which are practical. And you can always tell people's attitudes, when you talk to them, and it's very easy to pick up, when they're what they're giving off, but we have obviously, sometimes up to 100 people a day come through. So there's all sorts of people with all sorts of particular issues that you've got to learn to be wise. When we were first doing this work and working in the community this way, we got taken advantage of all the time. It's just because we were naive. We just didn't know, we didn't understand. And it was just like, we wanted to help and it was just like, all the time. But you learn. But you've got to learn and not become cynical. That's the thing. It's always maintaining an attitude of love and not cynicism or be cynical about it, you know, because then, you know, you lose that. That's when you lose the joy of doing what you're doing. You know, if you become cynical about it, and a lot of people do, you know, they get, you know, compassion fatigue. It's like, whereas, you know, we've got to show love and show compassion, but do it in the right way. And I think that's always going to be the way that God shows us, you know, not any formula, but, you know, practically, you know. And a lot of people, they're not called to be involved in that sort of work, and that's fine, you know. And so they may see someone in the street and they may just respond or not. But, you know, when you are involved in that sort of work, you know, you do learn to read people, and you learn to discern people, and you learn to see what's people, because some people will come in and, you know, they may be suicidal or presenting as suicidal, and you've got to be really careful in how you discern that, and you err on the side of caution when you're dealing with people like that, because, you know, you don't want to, you know, well, they're just swinging the lead or pretending to get sympathy or to get something out of you when they may not be. So it does require some discernment, I think, anyone who's dealing with people, it requires discernment. But God's got lots of it, and if we're looking in the right place, then that's the place to get it from, not just from our own understanding, because that will draw from memory, you know, and memory cannot necessarily always be good for every situation. You know, I don't want to treat someone like I've seen somebody else. I want to treat them the way they need to be treated. And that's only going to come from a discernment that comes out of God's heart for people, you know.
Yeah,
But
because
you know, God calls us to love, you know, and to demonstrate that love in the way that each of us are commissioned to do it. You know, and not everyone's drawn to the same thing. We've all got different things that God's put on our heart, and different passions and different callings and destiny. And that's where we need to focus, really, is, you know, some people try and do too much for everybody. You can't save the whole world. Only God can do that. You know, it's like, you know, in fact, he already has, you know. So what we can do is we can do to each person that actually we have got a mandate to deal with, and help them. You know, one person at a time, one family at a time. You know, it's like the whole story of the starfish that are washed up in the beach, and there's thousands of them. And, you know, someone says, well, you know, why are you bothering? It's just too many. He says, well, it's okay for this one, and I'm helping this one, and I'm helping this one. And you help those that you can, and you don't get burdened or condemned because you can't help everybody. You know, that will really burn people out if they get weighed down with it. But, you know, so, okay.
Yeah, I think if you look at each one of them as his children, you know, it puts a different perspective on it.
Yeah.
Because each one of them is his child, and we look at it here, he brings people to us. We don't go looking for people. He just brings them. And whoever he brings, we know that we're to see them through his eyes and just meet them where they are. But you were talking about the family a little while ago, and to simplify, really, I think where God's taking all of us is, he is the picture of the family. I mean, Father is the paternal side, Holy Spirit's the maternal side, and Jesus being the sibling, the showing us the way. But until you reconcile the old life, you know, the house that man made, basically, and forgive mom and allow Holy Spirit to take that role, forgive dad and allow Father to take that role, and forgive all those that have hurt you and let Jesus take that role, then you can start that joyous life that everybody's looking for. Because until the old has literally been reconciled and passed away and put under the blood, the new can't come, because we'll just gravitate to the old. And so it's only through the blood of the Lamb and only through forgiveness, true forgiveness, can that really occur. And And it's just so sad. I get so sad when I see people, because, sin is really the unmet need, and they're looking for ways to survive and cope. And it's just so sad. But like you said, all we can do is sit back and let the Lord bring whomever, and then just love them. And some will accept it, some won't, but to help them reconcile, look, this is the truth and the reality. You're hurt, and hurt people who hurt people who hurt people. And it's been happening for generation after generation after generation, but it can stop, in relationship. It's really beautiful. Yeah. Can I switch subjects for a minute?
Yeah, sure.
We have, God has been working to reestablish our bench. Carl and Cora and I have been a bench for about 4 or 5 years. Well, no, we didn't know what a bench was till we met you, so probably 3 years ago. I think we were a bench before, but we didn't know we were a bench.
Yeah.
But Carl has kind of taken, Carl and Cora become one, and we have the girl that came in from Utah is just come into our family last April. And so we've been establishing relationship. And I love what you were saying on the hangout the other day. It's all really about letting relationship come together before you can come together in the spirit realm. So we've been really working on that, and it's been beautiful. And we feel like this last bench meeting we had Monday or Tuesday, God really set his government, the picture of his government in our bench, and that we can now just organically start to administrate and govern. And one of the things that I actually caught a teaching of yours, I was in traffic Friday and jumped onto your Freedom Arc. It's the only thing I could grab with my wireless. And and I listened to a teaching about money. And I think it was the third one or the fourth one. Yeah. But in traffic, I was having to focus on both areas, and then I lost it because you only put those up, I think, until the next Sunday's meeting.
Yeah. I mean, they're all part of the Engaging God program, so you can always access
them. Okay. I'll go in and find it there. Awesome.
Yeah, because they're essentially, they just become the latest parts of the latest module for that. So yeah, you'll find all the teaching on that. I think that was the last 4 sessions I did of the new versus old module.
Yes. Yeah, so
it was. On to the restoration of all things now. So
awesome. Well, I'm going to go back there because so many of the things my spirit was going, pay attention, and you got brake lights in front of you and it's raining, and I was like, wait. But what really hit me, and I'm not sure, it might just have been the spirit that was speaking through that, but God has so done all of this for us with finances, and he's always kind of said, whatever I author, I will pay for. And we have not been allowed to solicit funds from anybody, anywhere, anyhow, and we don't plan. And he has just supernaturally funded us for 5 years, really. But what you were saying, and this is what hit me, it's like your dad takes care of everything for you until you reach a point where there's some maturity and there needs to be some involvement on your part. Yeah. And he's doing that with us individually and in our lives, but the finances have been always his up to this point. And I felt like in the car he was saying, it's time for you to start to steward what I have given you. And this is going to sound really odd, but this is what happened. In 2012, he released from heaven to earth $1 billion to what he's doing in the blueprint that he has. And we have repented, and we've Ishmaeled the blueprint till we couldn't Ishmael it anymore, and we finally have given up everything we ever thought we knew. And really, finally, he really does have control of what it is we're doing. Praise God. That was a wrestling match, like several years, but he's released some of that in through the last 5 years. But he's asking us to steward that. So that's what I really wanted to talk to you about, is it has come from heaven to earth. As a bench, we've placed all that into the kingdom. We've placed every seed that we've sown into the hearts of the people that have passed through here. And some people have seeded money unsolicited over the years, and we've put all that into the kingdom, sown it into the garden of our community. And I'm just wondering if you could, I am such a blank of how you would govern that, steward that. And when I was listening to another hangout you had, you were talking about how you guys have all these different setups, and there is money funneling in here and money funneling in here. And I just don't have a picture for that, other than I think as a bench, we need to go to him to get that, but to start looking ahead 2 years.
Yeah.
And how we call in this huge Amazon river that he's given us from, from a little bit. So anything you can lend there.
Yeah. I think when it comes to finance, obviously there's all sorts of stuff out there in teaching, and, I go into that in the teaching modules about it, and really look to try and simplify the whole thing. And I think in God's economy, it operates relationally. Everything operates relationally. So there's no formulas. I think, unfortunately, a lot of it's become formulaic. Well, if you sow, you're going to reap. Therefore, you just do this and you can just do that. And the formula of it has left the relationship out. So people just do it because they think it's the formula, rather than, well, what is God saying? Have you asked him what he wants you to do? So in relationship, everything begins to work out. But as we learn to be responsible and grow in maturity, then you do have to look and say, well, what are we going to need in 2 years' time? Or what are we going to need in 5 years' time? We need to start that coming to us now, rather than we get to 2 years and we're like, oh, we haven't got enough money. We're going to panic. Or he's providing it and it's all there, but it just happened. And he's wanting to teach us how to be good managers of it, but not just stewarding what we've got or what he intends us to have, but how we manage the process of releasing that. So I see it as, in a sense, there's 3 different aspects of it. Well, 4 actually. So in a sense, there's first, you engage God for a mandate for what you're doing, and the finance that's attached to that. So you know what you need, and therefore, if you're going to need something, you need to sow something to produce the multiplication that's going to bring you the need met. So you say, well, okay, well, what do you want me to sow for this? And that, again, is not formulaic. It doesn't have to be, it's whatever God says and wherever he says and for what he says. So then you get a mandate from heaven of what to do, where to sow, then you sow it. So you faithfully, generously, with a good heart and not under compulsion, sow. Then what do you do then? Well, then you need to do what you've done physically, spiritually. So you need to trade with the money that you've sown. So then you take it to the treasury room, your treasury room, engage Melchizedek there and give it as here is the spiritual side of this for the heavenly treasury that we have. And a lot of people, I think that treasury room is just overflowing, will have everything in it that you need. It has in there the seed and the food, because that's what God promises. He will give bread to the eater and seed to the sower. And then when you then take the seed that he gives you and you sow it where he wants you to sow it, then you can then go and actually, with Melchizedek, say, yeah, here is what I've done, and I am now trading this here with you for the fulfillment and the multiplication of what that is into this treasury room. And then it multiplies and it increases. And then you've got to withdraw it. And that's the interesting bit. So, well, okay, It's in the treasury room. How are we going to get it out of the treasury room? But that's again where you get a strategy, you know. And again, if they're wisdom, Melchizedek himself, okay, is there anything we need to do to be able to withdraw this? And sometimes it's like, sit back and wait, you know, because God will bring it in multiple different ways, you know, and he can put money into your bank account. He can tell people to give you money. You know, I knew some people in Brazil where piles of gold dust would appear, you know, and they would just sweep it up and go and exchange it. You know, it was like that, you know. So it comes in all sorts of different ways, but also God can do it in what we would see natural ways, but actually aren't natural because he's behind it, you know. And so sometimes people think, well, I'm working in this job. That isn't God's provision. I'm earning it. Well, if you take that attitude, then that's what I'm earning this, so it's mine, rather than, well, no, God is my provider, whichever way it comes. And he can provide that through my employment. He can provide that through multiple different ways. If you maintain that attitude of thanksgiving and praise of him and trust in him, then it says in Galatians that, you know, you will reap in due season if you don't get weary of doing good. And I think some people get weary of waiting and then try and do the Ishmael stuff and try and go and do this or do that or get the money from here and solicit money when God hasn't told you to. If God asks you to do something, then do it, because that's being obedient. And we've got to be careful that we don't get into I'm never going to do this, or this isn't right to do this, because God may tell you to do it, and then you're going to be stuck. So sometimes he may actually say, I want you to do this, and it's the very act of your obedience which actually connects with whoever he's going to bless you with or connect you with, whatever, in that sense. But you've got to prepare in advance. And then once you've done that, you can then go to your mountain and then you can begin to prepare the conditions for that release. So you can send angels out on assignment to connect up with those who are going to release the money. You know, you can call things that be not as if they are. So sometimes you have to create it. It doesn't exist yet. Sometimes you need to call for benefactors who God has assigned as financial kingdom pillars, who will release finances into the kingdom, because that's their job. That's their destiny, is to release finance for God's kingdom, where some people's destiny is to use finance for God's kingdom. You know, so it's, again, being led by the Spirit. What do we do? But whatever you do, you have to establish it in heaven first so that it can manifest in the earth. And that's where it's being really careful only to do what you see the Father doing, being led by the Spirit and not by panic or the need, you know. So how did Jesus create the coins that were in the fish's mouth? He created them. You know, I mean, I've heard people say such stupid things. Oh, they must have fallen out the pocket of a fisherman and the fish swallowed it and all sorts of stuff. Well, it wouldn't have been in its mouth if he swallowed it. It would have been in its guts. You know, that would open it up to find it. It was actually waiting there in the mouth. So it was a supernatural thing. He created that. He spoke it into being and manifested it in the mouth. So, you know, if you want to follow that example, you can go and call the neighborhood cat to come with a big roll of notes in its mouth and drop it on your doorstep or something. Because, you know, I'm not suggesting that that's a good thing to do, but actually if God said so, then you can creatively call that into being. So whatever it is, we have to start creating it. So you have to get this trickle starting, but it's no good trying to get it a trickle the day you need it. You have to get it a trickle until it's flowing towards you. So when you get to it, it's going to be there in the fullness of its flow. And so many people are panicking and worried about finances because they've not prepared in advance. So we should all be looking at, what are we called to do? What's our destiny? What are specifically those things that we're going to have to the need of finances for? And then we begin to administrate that properly, rather than, you know, just sitting back and letting God do it, which is fine when you don't know what to do. you know, and God does look after his children, but he does want to mature us so that we are going to be able to handle the resources of his kingdom. And, you know, if we can't manage, you know, a few $1 billion, whatever, we're never going to manage a planet or a solar system or a galaxy or whatever else. So we're learning to do little things, faithful with, I mean, $1 billion is a little thing in God's economy. It's no big deal. For us, it was like, what would we do with $1 million or $1 billion? Well, if you don't know what you're going to do with it, why would he give it you?
Yeah.
So we need to have the strategy and the plan of what it is this is going to fulfill, whether we're called to bless this or to see this established or to set up a foundation for this, or we need to really have those creative things within our spirit, carrying in our heart, so that the desire of our heart will stimulate that finance to come towards us. You know, and, you know, I have a vision for lots of finances, but I have very clear things of what I would do with it and who I would give it to and why and for what and how we would spend this and how we would use that, because I am dreaming and creating the scenario where I can already see it. And it won't necessarily all be finances that we need. There are other resources that we need, not just money. And they are the relationships and the connections with people and the kingdom relationships that need to be established. You know, there's more to, you know, what's in the treasury room than just money.
Well, he's kind of shown us vision as far as we've seen what the next step is, which is actual community. And then we've seen the next step is where we finance other communities.
Yeah.
And so we've seen the bigger multiplication, whether we see it in our lifetime or not, I don't know. But, you know, that's the bigger picture is establishing communities where those that are desperate come, and then they replicate that in their community, and then they replicate that, and it's like you have the each one teach one thing to where it starts to multiply and just go forward. And we've seen all that big picture. And you know, it was 6 years ago, it was 2012, yeah, in April. It's been 6 years since he did that. And I think a lot of what he's been waiting on is just our maturity, you know, and what do we do with what we have?
Yeah. You
know, and we've been very, you know, frugal as far as we don't do anything but what he tells us to do. And most of the seed, all the seed that's been sown for us has been into the hearts of people and not financially. We're not a resource for that, but we do we sow into the hearts of people relationship with God. And then, you know, we've seen bloodline after bloodline be released. And on our meeting on Tuesday, we took everything and we saw it actually all pass through the blood. Everything that's been done as a community for the last 6 years, we put all into and went, and it just passed through the blood, because obviously so many mistakes in the middle of all that. You know, we were trying to figure out who we were, you know. But yeah, that is awesome, because what I feel like is done, it's already done in the heavenlies, but now how do we, like you're saying, create out of that, and how do we begin to govern out of that into what he's asked us to do? And it just needs to be done as a bench, by revelation only, by his word only, Rhema word.
By agreement, and then you establish things in the heavens, but then you've got to call them out into the earth. You've got to release it into the earth, and that can be done in lots of different ways. Obviously, angels can be assigned and established, and lots of things can facilitate that. But you've got to be, you have to trust and be in faith. You know, it's no good being in fear or panic. That's the thing with a lot of these things. And what you carry in your heart, you have authority towards. And it's really important to carry the heart of and the vision of that within your hearts and incubate it and nurture it. And then when you speak, you're speaking it out of life. You're speaking life into it and you're calling it into being. And actually, in the future, we may not have physical currency to use.
Right.
You know, we need to learn how to create, like Jesus created the coin. He multiplied the bread out of something that already existed, but he created the coin. And we need to see that the abilities that we have as sons in creativity as co-creators means that we won't always have to need to use physical things to see things manifest. Because everything that is seen, it says, came out of that which wasn't seen. Mm-hmm. So it came out of another realm. It came out of something you couldn't see physically. So how do we manifest something out of another realm? We've got to learn to speak creatively like Jesus did, like the word did in the beginning. You know, let there be. So let there be a community. Let there be these physical homes that need, and some of that is they will be, not just we'll find some that are already made or whatever. We will create them and call them, and we therefore need to have the specs of what we want. Because it's no good saying, well, I want sort of a house. Well, how many bedrooms do you want? And how many this and that, what do you need in it? And we've got to be specific. So when we're creating something, we're not going to create something that we don't carry, because you have to release what you carry. So we need to incubate and carry, what does a community look like? Right. How many people are going to live in that community? And there may be different types of community for different situations. So how do we create them? How do we call them into being? And actually, I believe when we're establishing these things of heaven on earth, we will be able to see things supernaturally created, like buildings, wow, which we don't make with bricks and mortar or whatever. We actually make by calling the particles which exist as strings of energy, the voice of God, and call them into being and call them into manifestation. So that, you know, that's some of the things we will be able to do, but we've got to start with where we are. And that might be at the beginning, calling forth the finances or calling forth the resource needed for any particular situation. But you've got to see it. You know, you've got to have the image of it. You've got to have the vision, the picture for it that you carry, that you can birth. And then what you begin to decree and declare and call forth is not coming out of wishful thinking, but out of the expectation of hope. You know, hope is what becomes the manifested faith, if you like. What are we hoping for? And we're not wishing for. What is our white hot expectation for? The establishing of this community or this area or whatever it is. And for everyone, it will be different in terms of what they're called to manifest. But we've got to begin to actually function that way. Otherwise, we're not being like sons. You know, how did God create things? Well, how did he create the animals and the plants? Well, some of it he created the raw material and Adam did the rest. And some of it he already had in his own garden and he just replicated it in this realm, because this realm is a replication of that realm. So what does community look like in that realm? And that will be a good thing to go and engage the Father. What does your community look like? Because his community is obviously Father, Son, and Spirit, but also there's the seven spirits of God. There's wisdom. There's all these angels. You know, there's these orders of angels, and they're all, you know. So there's community there. There's the cloud of witnesses, and there's all these things. You know. So what does it look like? How does it function? You know, what's the heart behind it? Because that's really what we want to manifest on earth. You know, that which is already in heaven. But we're creative. And therefore, it's not the blueprint, which is the restriction. It's the heart of God, which is the trigger to create, you know. And I think a lot of people try and think, well, give us the blueprint, which is so specific that we have all the details. Well, what he's basically saying, well, okay, I want you to build a car, but I'm not going to tell you what it looks like, or at what color it is, or what the wheels are looking like, or whether it is a sports car or a truck or whatever. I'm just saying, I want you to create a vehicle. So you create it out of what is in your heart, because that is where the power comes from. What the heart of it that you carry, and then you start calling things and decreeing things and doing it like that, and I think maybe at the beginning we may see little things which are manifestations of that, but then later on it will become more of that is the norm. It's just things manifest out of the unseen realm, not made with the bits and pieces that are already here. Anyway, there we go. Right, I better leave it there because I've got another meeting starting straight away.
Well,
I think next time on this meeting, I don't know if anyone will be okay if I put it back to 7:30 rather than 8, because that would give us a little bit longer, and then I wouldn't be jumping straight into another meeting. So
you mean 8:30 instead of 9?
Yes, 8:30 instead of 9, or 7:30 instead of 8, because it's Eastern time zone and mid time zone.
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll have a think about it anyway. So.
But Mike, thank you, because you so just nailed it and got out of the natural into the creative, what is possible, and it opens the way. And just thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mike.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy your meeting.
Okay. Nice to see you, and I'll see you next